Before we begin, take a quiet moment and imagine this scene. A small roadside bar, somewhere along an old American highway. The kind of place that has stood there for decades, where the wooden floors creak, and the walls carry stories older than the people sitting inside. Now imagine a group of bikers. Big men, gray beards, leather jackets that have seen thousands of miles of road. Men who have lived long lives and learned more from the road than from books. And then, the door opens. A teenage girl walks in, wearing a biker jacket that clearly doesn't belong to her. At first, the men laugh. But 30 seconds later, no one in that room is laughing anymore. Because stitched onto that jacket is a patch that changes everything. And what happened next is a story about kindness, respect, and the quiet legacy a good person leaves behind. So settle in, take a breath, and listen carefully. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories begin with laughter and end with understanding. The afternoon sun rested gently against the windows of Miller's Roadhouse, a biker bar that had stood along Route 18 since the early 1970s. Inside, time seemed to move a little slower. Old country music played quietly in the background. The scent of coffee drifted through the room, mixing with leather and engine oil. At a large wooden table near the window sat three longtime friends. Raymond Ray Bennett, 63 years old, broad shoulders, silver beard, and the calm eyes of a man who had seen most of life's storms already pass. Next to him was Walter Hayes, a tall man with weathered hands and deep laugh lines around his eyes. Across from them sat Thomas Tom Grady, the youngest of the group at 58, though the gray in his beard suggested otherwise. These men had ridden together for decades. They had crossed deserts, mountains, small towns, and long empty highways that stretched farther than the eye could see. But these days, they mostly gathered here. Not for long rides, just for conversation. Because when you reach a certain age, you realize the greatest journeys were never really about the miles. They were about the people beside you. Ray lifted his coffee mug slowly. You remember that ride through Colorado back in '82? He asked with a small smile. Tom laughed. How could I forget? Walter's bike broke down halfway up the mountain. Walter shook his head. That carburetor was older than I was. The three men chuckled. It was the comfortable laughter of old friends, the kind that comes from memories shared over many years. Outside, the distant sound of motorcycles passed along the highway. Ray leaned back in his chair. You know, he said thoughtfully, most folks think biker clubs are about noise and trouble. Tom nodded slowly. But the truth is, the best riders I ever knew were the kindest men I ever met. Walter raised an eyebrow. That sounds like something Jack Morgan used to say. Ray's smile softened at the mention of the name. Yeah, he said quietly. Jack believed the road taught people how to take care of each other. For a moment, the table grew quiet. Some names carry memories that deserve silence. And just then, the door opened. A young girl stepped inside. She looked about 16 years old. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a gray hoodie beneath a black leather biker vest. The vest hung loosely on her shoulders, clearly too large for her. The men at the table noticed her immediately. Walter chuckled softly. Well now, that's something you don't see every day. Tom leaned forward. That jacket's older than she is. A few other bikers around the room laughed lightly. Not cruel laughter. Just the kind of surprise laughter older men sometimes share when something unexpected walks through the door. The girl paused near the entrance. Her name was Lily Morgan. And though she tried to look calm, her hands tightened slightly at her sides. She had never been inside a biker bar before. But her father had told her about this place many times. He used to say, if you ever need good people, go to Miller's Roadhouse. So she had come. Lily slowly walked toward the counter. Ray watched her quietly. Something about her seemed familiar. Not her face. Something else. The leather vest she wore had several patches stitched carefully across the back. Across the top, a large curved patch read, Iron Wolves. Below it spread a large embroidered eagle with wide wings. And beneath that, a smaller patch that read, 1971. But it was the final patch, stitched neatly near the bottom, that caught Ray's eye. The words were simple, but powerful. Founding member. Ray's smile slowly faded. Walter noticed his expression. What's wrong? He asked. Ray leaned forward slightly. Tom, do you see that patch? Tom turned his head, studying the vest carefully. Then his eyes widened. Well, I'll be. Walter frowned. What? Tom spoke quietly. That vest belongs to someone we used to ride with. Ray slowly stood up from the table. The room began to grow quiet. Lily reached the counter and ordered a glass of lemonade. When she turned around, she noticed the older bikers looking at her. Ray approached gently, careful not to frighten her. His voice was calm. Excuse me, miss. Lily looked up. Yes, sir. Ray pointed softly toward the vest. That jacket belonged to someone important to us. Lily nodded. My dad. Ray's voice grew even softer. Would his name happen to be Jack Morgan? The girl blinked in surprise. Yes, she said quietly. How did you know? For a moment, no one spoke. Then Tom stood up. Walter followed. And slowly, every biker in the room rose from their seat. Ray placed his hand over his heart. Lily, he said gently. Your father helped start this club. The girl looked down at the vest. Her voice trembled slightly. He passed away last winter. Ray nodded slowly. We heard. Walter smiled warmly. Your dad once rode 50 miles in the rain just to help me fix a broken engine. Tom chuckled. And he refused to take a single dollar for it. Lily listened, her eyes shining. For years, she had only known her father as a quiet man who loved motorcycles. But here in this room, she was beginning to understand something deeper. Her father hadn't just ridden with these men. He had changed their lives. Ray gently pulled out a chair. Why don't you sit with us, he said kindly. We've got a lot of stories about your dad. Lily sat down slowly. Walter slid a lemonade across the table. No alcohol, he said with a grin. Your dad would never forgive us. The room filled with warm laughter. And for the next hour, then the next, and the next, the bikers told stories. Not about speed, not about danger, but about kindness. Helping strangers on lonely highways. Fixing broken bikes for soldiers returning home. Sharing food with travelers who had nothing. By the time the sun began to set outside Miller's Roadhouse, Lily realized something important. Her father's greatest legacy wasn't the biker club. It wasn't the motorcycle. It wasn't even the miles he had ridden. His legacy was the good he had left in the hearts of others. Ray lifted his coffee mug slowly. To Jack Morgan, he said. The room grew quiet. Every rider raised their glass. And Lily raised her lemonade. In that small roadside bar, what had begun with laughter had turned into something far more meaningful. Respect. Memory. And the gentle reminder that a good life leaves echoes long after the road ends.